Welcome to IB Online. I'm MJ, your instructor for A-level Sociology. Our topic for today is socialization, where we'd be discussing the nurture side of the debate. Now, for this topic, this is in continuation of the previous topic where we had spoken about the extent to which socialization plays its role in terms of developing human behavior. If we are to answer a 26 marker evaluative essay question on this, where it says evaluate the view that socialization plays an important role, or rather say evaluate the view that socialization is the most important factor in terms of shaping human behavior. Of course, we'd be expected to give write down content both in support of the argument and against the argument as well. So for a question of this sort, this nature, we are to write down in support of the nature side of the debate, and we are also as a counter argument or as an antithesis or as on the flip side of the coin, we are expected to write down in support of the nurture side of the debate as well. So for the nature side of the debate, we're already done with this in the previous lesson. Today, we'd be focusing on the nurture side of the debate. As we speak about the nurture side of the debate, the idea is that it is socialization. The idea is that it is socialization, or it is the learning process that makes individuals behave the way they do. This learning is through the environment. This learning is through the experiences we have, so on and so forth. Now, while discussing the nurture side of the argument, we would be taking into account feral children. We'd speak about cross-cultural variations. We'd speak about the iron meat theory. We'd speak about the presentation of self theory, the idea put forward by Goffman. We'd speak about the looking glass self theory, the agencies of socialization, so on and so forth. Without any further ado, let's begin. If you want to go through these questions that we've had on socialization, we have them in the previous lesson. And I'd like to strongly advise you to go through that lesson before you continue with this. Now, to begin with, let's talk about socialization again. Socialization, as I kept on explaining in the previous lesson, in its most basic form, we believe, or we use the word socialization to refer to a learning process that changes human beings into social beings. Us as human beings, how is it, or what is it that changes us into social beings? Now, to support, or rather say in support of the idea of socialization, in support of the idea that socialization plays an important role in terms of helping us shape our behavior, helping us behave the way we do, helping us do whatever we do, we'd speak about feral children first. Now, to begin with, we need to understand what we mean when we use the term feral children. As we use the term feral children are children who have lived isolated from human contact from a very young age. So the children who have lived in isolation from human contact from a very young age, we refer to them as as feral children, I'm sorry. So these feral children, they have very little to no experience of human contact. And because of that, they have no to little experience of human care, their behavior, the language they use, so on and so forth. These children, they often grow up in the wild. Sometimes they're raised by animals as well, or at times they're confined and deprived of normal social interaction by their caregivers. Let's discuss a couple of characteristics of these feral children. Now, if you still haven't understood feral children, you might as well think of the movie Jungle Book, right? The child in the movie Jungle Book, that child lacked any trait, any quality, any characteristic that made him a recognizable human being. And a reason behind that could be the socialization process. It was because the child lacked the socialization process. It was because that child lacked any sort of human contact. The child ended up not having any traits that are typically expected of humans. Now, about feral children, one, we need to understand that they lack socialization. Number two, they lack socialization. That is exactly why we're discussing them here today. When they lack socialization, they do not tend to exhibit typical human behavior, such as they are not expected to, or they do not, you don't really see them, you don't really see them behaving in a manner that they would be following social norms or things that are expected from them. Likewise, They might not have developed language skills, or language acquisition might be missing. They might experience problems when it comes to showing acceptance towards societal rules as well. Now, when you talk about showing acceptance towards societal rules, I'm sure you'd agree, for us as individuals, for us to be able to fit in within a society, there are certain rules and regulations, certain written rules, certain unwritten rules that we're expected to be following. So the first characteristic of feral children, they lack socialization. Number two, we'd see them exhibiting animal-like behavior. Now, what do I mean when I say we see them witnessing, we witness them behaving like animals? From the way they walk, the way they communicate with each other is pretty, or the way they eat their food, it makes them look more like animals than humans. Another third characteristic or a trait of feral children, they experience delayed development. These children often show significant delays when it comes to physical, emotional, and cognitive development. Physical development, emotional development, and cognitive development, your cognitions, your thought process. And as a consequence, they might struggle with acquiring language skills. They might experience difficulty when it comes to forming relationships with other humans too. Another characteristic of these feral children, it has been seen that they often experience challenges when it comes to their rehabilitation process. Another important concern that is to be taken into account when you talk about studying these feral children is ethical concerns. So a couple of traits, a couple of characteristics of these feral children, I'd say let's keep four in mind. Number one, they lack socialization. That is exactly what we're interested in here today. Number two, they behave more like animals. Number three, they experience delayed development. And number four, there are challenges that have been there are challenges that we see. There are challenges they face when it comes to their rehabilitation. So without any further ado, let's begin. Let's continue with the role that feral children play in terms of helping us understand the significance of this socialization process. So, a feral child, also known as a wild child, is a human child who has lived isolated from human contact from a very young age, and so has little or no experience of human care, behavior, or human language. Feral children have missed on primary socialization by humans. Now, when we speak about socialization, the socialization that we're referring to, we broadly divide the socialization process into two phases. Number one is referred to as primary socialization, and the second one is referred to as secondary socialization. Now, as we speak about primary socialization, primarily, I'm sure you'd all agree, primarily, we're all socialized by our families. It is our families that teach us how to walk, how to talk, how to eat, how to sit, how to act like humans, and be able to fit in within a society. So, feral children have missed out on primary socialization by humans. Examples attract a lot of media attention. Of course, why is it that examples of feral children, they attract a lot of media attention? Because they're different. They are not like other human beings. But in most cases, the evidence has been very unclear. For example, it is usually uncertain how long the child was away from people, and some often noted cases have been proved fake. Feral children can be raised by animals, or they can survive on their own as well. Evidence of, there are so many videos that are available on YouTube. You might as well YouTube this, you might as well Google this, and you'd see how what we're talking about, how we're discussing right now is actually true. So, evidence of human infants raised by animals is rare and not always reliable. One example is of Saturday Methane, who was discovered in 1987. Now, when we speak about these feral children, you might as well want to know a couple of examples. You do not have to confine yourselves to the examples that we have right here. You could write down about Shamdev, this young boy who was found in the Musafir Khana forest in India. And this young boy, Shamdev, as he was later named as Shamdev, what happened was there were a couple of hunters. They went for hunting at the Musafir Khana forest in India, and they came across a young boy, a human child who was actually playing with wolf cubs. And very soon the hunters, they got hold of him, and they took him back to the village. When they brought him back to the village, they realized that the child hardly had any characteristic that made him look like a recognizable human being. For instance, the child would howl at nights like a wolf. The child would, as the child smelt blood. Now, let's just say if there's anyone nearby who's had an injury and is bleeding, if the child would smell blood, the child would try to attack that person. The child would, I'm talking about Shamdev here. The child would, it was necessary to tie him up at night because the child would try to run back to the forest. Uh, it was the child's favorite meal, or Shamdev's favorite meal was chicken. He would catch them, kill them, and eat them raw. Now, all of these characteristics, all of these traits that I've just mentioned, you don't expect a human being, a socialized human being, to behave in this particular manner. So that's one example. Let's move on to another of this child, Saturday Mateen, who was discovered in 1987, aged 5, living with a pack of monkeys in South Africa, and who years later still behaved in ways that were associated more with monkeys rather than humans. However, evidence of children raised with little or no human contact is more common. Now, if we speak about the specific example of Saturday Mateen, this young child who was found playing with and living with a pack of monkeys, right? Now, don't you think this is an amazing example when it comes to our understanding of human behavior? If it would have been for if human behavior, or if human behavior had more to do with nature, if human behavior had more to do with biology, why is it that this young child Saturday Methane, or this another case that we have of this young child Jeannie, or another case that I just mentioned of this child Shamdev, how is it, or why is it that you think these children did not end up being or acting like or behaving like human beings like you and I do? So a well another example, the third example, there was the about Shamdev, I just mentioned it, you might as well Google it, that's not written over here. So the ones that are written over here, a well documented example is of Jeannie. Now, who was Jeannie? Jeannie was a 13-year-old Californian girl discovered in the 1970s. Pines in 1997 noted that Jeannie had been isolated in a small room and had not been spoken to by her parents since infancy. So, a young child, when discovered, it was found that this child was kept in isolation and lacked any sort of human contact. This child was locked up in a room. She was malnourished, she was abused, she was unloved, bereft of any toys or companionship. When Jeannie was found, she could not stand erect. She could not stand on her feet like you and I do, which forces me to believe that us as humans, a lot of what we do is perhaps because of the socialization process. It's probably because we have at some point or the other been taught how to behave in this particular manner. So Jeannie was unable to speak, she could only whimper. Now, what if you get a question that says, describe 2 ways in which feral children are considered to be sociologically significant while studying socialization? So, social significance of feral children now. First, as we speak about these feral children, first, when children are raised without human contact, they fail to show the social and physical development we would expect from an ordinarily raised child, right? So, had it again, the question that we could raise over here is, had it only been, or had it mainly been because of nature, these children, they would have not lacked any sort of social and physical development, and which would have led to them being like us. So, for example, walking upright, talking, using a knife or fork. Children raised by animals behave as the animals do, suggesting they learn by imitation. Now, a lot of what we do, we imitate, we copy. At times there are things that are done around us as a young child deliberately so that we end up catching up on it, we end up copying it. However, there are other instances where we end up picking on things from our environment and experience which no one intentionally tried to teach us. Could be good things, could be bad things, both. So imitation learning plays a very important role, and all of this comes under the heading of the socialization process. One. Number two, if human behavior is instinctive, it is not clear why children such as Jeannie should develop so differently from children raised with human contact. We would also expect that once returned to human society, feral children would quickly pick up on normal human behavior. This, however, is not the case, suggesting that if children miss out on socialization by humans at an early age in their life, this cannot be corrected later. Like I had mentioned, there are certain rehabilitation challenges that we experience when it comes to rehabilitating these feral children. Feral children often face immense challenges when reintegrating into human society. They may require extensive therapy and education to develop even the most basic of social and communication skills. However, their progress can be limited by the extent and duration of their isolation. Of course, that's an extraneous variable, the amount of time the child has been kept in isolation, the amount of duration that a child has lacked any sort of human contact would again be playing a very important role when it comes to helping the child recover through the rehabilitation processes. So feral children could be an amazing example in support of the idea of socialization, or in other words, in support of the idea that nurture plays a very important role when it comes to explaining human behavior, when it comes to understanding human behavior, when it comes to us trying to learn how humans behave, why humans behave the way they do. One. Number two, we could also speak about cultural differences. We could speak about cross-cultural variations. There are certain things, I mean, the way we greet, I'm sure this picture helps you understand quite a lot over here. Now, taking this ahead, further evidence on the significance of socialization is the fact that different cultures develop different ways of doing things. If human behaviors were governed by instinct, we would expect there to be few, if any, differences between societies. In fact, of course, there are huge variations between different cultures, regardless of how trivial they may be at times, regardless of how tiny these differences might be. Allow me to give you an example over here. For instance, if you come across someone in any tribal area, right, they'd probably be using their hands to consume food. On the other hand, if you come across someone in, let's just say, the more developed parts of the world, and this has more to do with the Western culture, you'd see them you'd see them eating food with with a fork and a spoon and a knife. You come across someone in Asia, or let's just say you go to China, you'd see people using chopsticks. So in all three cases that I just mentioned, you see individuals eating food, but the way they're eating food is different from one another. So this could be the second example that you could possibly use. Another example of cultural difference that we could discuss over here was by Bilikoff in 1999. Bilikoff compared different societies and discovered through his own experience that in Russia, when a man peels a banana for a lady, it means he has a romantic interest in her. At other times, cultural differences are more fundamental. Now, this could be another example. You want to learn it, you learn it. You This is an example actually picked from your course book. Number three, if we speak about Wojciech. Now, if we speak about Wojciech, with time, now see, these differences that we are referring to over here, these differences, we get to witness them if we're talking about a comparison between one society and another, right? Like I had mentioned, cross-cultural variation. At the same time, over over the period of time, you'd see certain societies experiencing things or doing things in a different manner. And again, this forces me to think, had it all been natural, everyone would have behaved in the same manner. I mean, people back in the 18th, 19th, 20th century would have behaved in the same manner as people do in the 21st century today. So Wojciech argues that in Victorian Britain, most women lived in a state little better than slavery. As she notes, women's sole purpose was to marry and reproduce. This is not a situation we would recognize in British society today, as I speak in the 21st century. If human behavior was instinctive, it could be much the same in any place or time. So two examples that we have taken into account in support of the idea of socialization, or in support of the idea that nurture nurture plays a more important role when it comes to the socialization process. Number three, let me give you a brief little idea about this gentleman. This gentleman that we have over here is George Herbert Mead. George Herbert Mead, also referred to as a symbolic interactionist. Now, pre-2021, sociological perspectives, right? You need to listen to this carefully and understand what I'm trying to explain. Pre-2021, paper one used to also include questions on sociological perspectives. However, post 2021, after the syllabus and the paper structure changed in 2021, you did not get any direct questions on sociological perspectives. So you're safe on that end. Nonetheless, it is always advised that you use a sociological. I mean, this is something that I'm saying as a teacher, as an instructor over here. You're always advised to understand these sociological perspectives and to use them wherever you can. So, what is symbolic interactionism? Again, symbolic interactionism is a sociological perspective. Who is George Herbert Mead? George Herbert Mead is a symbolic interactionist. He came up with a theory referred to as the I and me theory, right? Now, what is this I and me theory? This I and me theory is also seen by many as a socialization theory. So, in a nutshell, this theory that I'm trying to give you a basic little idea on, which we could again use while answering questions on socialization in support of the socialization or the nurture side of the debate. Now, as we speak about this I and me theory, I and me theory is a theory of socialization. It is about a transformation from the unsocialized self, that is I, to a socialized self, that is me. Now, I and me is what I had said. I and me. Let me just put this into a box so that you know what to focus on at this point. So we're talking about the I and the me theory. If I put it in a simple manner, I is what you're born with. Me is what you socialize into. Now, I could be seen an individual who lacks socialization, or an individual who has not been socialized as yet, doesn't really take the society into account. For instance, if I may give you an example of a newborn, right? A newborn hasn't yet encountered socialization the way he or she would as he or she grows older. So it wouldn't be wrong if we say that a newborn lacks socialization. I'm sure you'd be able to understand this, if not relate to this. You've seen how a newborn doesn't really care about the environment around. A newborn would sleep whenever, smile whenever, cry whenever, demand food whenever, through crying, of course. So burp whenever, so on and so forth. So an unsocialized self. From now, when we speak about this I and me theory, it's actually a transition. It's a transition, or you might as well use the word, it's a transformation. It's a transformation from an unsocialized self to a socialized self, right? So your I is when you lack socialization. Your I is when you lack socialization, from a point that you lack socialization to a point where you socialize. Where you socialize, in other words, when you start taking the people around you under consideration. When you start taking the people around you under consideration. For instance, today, you're a teenager, almost an adult. If you're studying this, you, I'm sure, would agree today, whatever you do take into account the people, the society around you. If I may give you a very basic example over here to help you understand this better, let's just say you wear a particular color, you wear blue, someone tells you you look amazing in blue, you would want to wear blue again. This, I could give you another example over here, or in fact, we have another example on the slide ahead. So I wouldn't really get into a lot of detail. Like I said, you wouldn't be tested today on this I and me theory. Nonetheless, the I and me theory and George Herbert Mead could be used as a reference in support of the idea of socialization, or the role that socialization plays when it comes to understanding human behavior. So I and me theory is the theory of socialization. It is about a transformation from the unsocialized self to a socialized self, where an individual starts taking under consideration people and the society he or she is a part of. Now, basic human skills have to be taught and learned. The symbolic interactionist Mead, that is George Herbert Mead, in 1934 argued that the same was true of more advanced social skills. He claimed that the social context in which behavior occurs conditions how people behave. So, according to Mead, Mead claimed that the social context in which a particular behavior occurs conditions how people behave. We have an amazing example on the next slide that would help you understand this part really well. So while self-awareness, that is the ability to see ourselves as others see us and react accordingly, is often seen as an instinctive human skill, Mead argued that it is in fact learned. It involves developing a concept of self, and this is what sets humans apart from animals. For me, the self is an awareness of who we are. This has two related aspects. Number one, the I aspect. The I aspect is based around our opinion of ourselves as a whole. We each respond to the behavior of others as an I. Mead called this the unsocialized self, whereas me is the aspect that consists of an awareness of how others expect us to behave in a given situation. And you'd realize that today you behave more the way you think others want you to behave instead of you doing whatever you want to do. Something as simple as you wouldn't simply walk into any formal event in your pajamas. You wouldn't, right? So because you're behaving the way the society expects you to behave. So Mead called this the social self because it develops through the process of socialization. Now, this is the example that I was trying to explain you. I just read through this so that you understand it real quick. So, for example, if you accidentally put your hand in a fire, the I is expressed by how you react to the pain. The me, however, specifically conditions how you choose to express the pain. Your reaction would be conditioned by factors such as who you are. If you're a child, you'd now we talking about wait, we talking about you accidentally putting your hand in fire, just in case you missed it earlier, right? So your reaction has more to do with who you are, where you are, and who you are with. If you who you are, if you're an adult, you'd probably behave in a different manner as compared to you being a child. If you're a male, you probably react in a different manner as compared to you being a female. Likewise, where you are, if you're alone at home, you might as well react in a different manner as compared to you being and you being in a public place. Number three, who you are with. If you're with your family, you'd behave in a more sophisticated manner. If you're with your friends, you would you'd respond in a different manner. If you with strangers, you'd again different respond or react in an entirely different manner. So if you are a young child, for example, if you're a young child, for example, your reaction to being burnt may be to cry. If you're a young man, you may feel that crying is not a socially acceptable reaction, so you may swear loudly instead. Swearing loudly may be acceptable if you are at home by yourself, but may not be acceptable if you're fixing a stranger's fire as a part of your job. Similarly, if you have been messing around with friends when you burnt your hands, their reaction may be to laugh and make fun of your pain. Laughter would though not be appropriate reaction if it was your child who has burnt that their hand. So I think this example over here would help you understand the role or the way you could possibly use this I and me theory, that is a theory of socialization, while answering any question on this very topic. So we initially in support of the idea of socialization, or in support of the idea that nurture plays a more important role when it comes to explaining human behavior, we initially spoke about the role feral children play. Number two, we spoke about cross-cultural comparisons, where we spoke about how with time across societies there are significant changes that societies experience, which consequently results in us changing our behaviors accordingly. Number three, we spoke about the I and me theory, and now we move on and discuss this presentation of self. It was Erving Goffman. It was Goffman who in 1959 came up with the concept of the presentation of self. Now, as we studied the I and me theory right before this, if the context of an act changes, understand this line first. if the context of an act changes, both its meaning and how people react, right? Remember, the situation was same. The situation was an individual accidentally putting his or her hand in the fire, right? So the context was in terms of who you are, where you are, and who you are with, right? Now, if the social context of an act changes, both its meaning and how people react to it, right? It changes its meaning and how people would react to it. That it follows that an awareness of self is constructed and developed socially, right? An awareness of self, right? I need to see who I am. And based on who I am, I need to react accordingly. What situation am I in? What role am I playing over here now? As of right now, you see me as a sociology instructor, and I'm expected to play my role accordingly. So, if the social context of an act changes, both its meaning and how people react, it follows that an awareness of self is constructed and developed socially. Goffman in 1959 argued that who we believe ourselves to be. Goffman argued that who we believe ourselves to be, that is a sense of identity, is also a social construction or is also constructed socially. Or in other words, what we think of ourselves or how we identify ourselves or what our sense of identity is, according to Goffman, is again constructed by the society through how we present ourselves to others. So Goffman argued that who we believe ourselves to be, that is a sense of identity, is also constructed socially through how we present ourselves to others, how we presenting ourselves to others. Goffman proposed a model of self and identity in which he described social life as a series of dramatic episodes. This is really interesting. According to Goffman, he proposed a model of self and identity in which he described social life as a series of dramatic episodes. Now, the social life we're living, the life we're living, it is a series of dramatic episodes, according to Goffman. He claims people are actors. Sometimes they write and speak their own lines, that is their personal identity. Sometimes they follow lines that are written for them. Now, as I play the role of a teacher over here, there are certain do's and don'ts that I am to be adhering to. While at the same time, there is a bit of flexibility that I have when I am to play this role the way I'd want to play it, right? Now, sometimes they write and speak their own lines. This is their personal identity. Sometimes they follow lines that are written for them. The external influences that inform how people behave in particular situations and roles, like I said, there are certain prescribed demands of playing the role of a teacher, which I am adhering to right now. So, for example, because we understand how our society defines masculinity and femininity, right? I'm a male. The idea behind masculinity, our society has certain expectations of how it is like to act like a male. And so is the case for females. For example, because we understand how our society defines masculinity and femininity, we know how we expected to behave. If we are male or female, we can also work out how others will react to our behavior. We can see ourselves as others do and adjust our behavior so as to try to make the impression on them that we want to achieve, right? We can work out how others will react to our behavior. So if you react in a particular behavior, in a particular manner in front of public, you do keep in mind that the way you are behaving, the way you're portraying yourself, the identity that you have on display at that particular moment, this is flexible. This is something that could be adjusted according to what particular impression you want to leave what particular impression you want to leave on others. Now, for instance, if I may give you a more relatable example over here, the way you are now, if you talk about, if I talk about you right now, okay, enough of talking about me. If we talk about you right now, the impression you want to leave on your parents, the most obedient child, right? The impression you want to leave on your parents is the way you behave in front of them. The impression you want to leave on your friends is the way you behave in front of them. The impression you want to leave on your teachers is the way you behave in front of them. The impression you want to leave on your classmates, or if you've stepped into a new class with people that you hardly know, the way you want yourself to be seen by them would eventually lead to you behaving in a manner that leaves that particular impression on them. So the idea of creating an impression is also significant in relation to how we present ourselves in different situations. Government suggests that when we adopt a particular identity, we perform to others in order to manage the impression they have on us, right? Now, if you have if you've successfully left an impression on others, whatever the desired impression that you wanted to leave, then you would try to keep on managing, then you'd keep on trying to act in a manner that that particular impression is continues to be on them, right? Identity performance therefore is about achieving a described result. When you want to create a favorable impression on someone, you act in ways you believe they will like, right? When you want to create a favorable impression on someone, you act in ways you believe they will like. For example, if you want to be seen as a good sociology student, you could carry about around a textbook and a full folder of notes. Now, I know to what extent do you find this relatable, but a lot of what we're discussing right now is what we have experienced, is what we experience more often than we think of, right? So understanding sociology, if I talk about this particular discipline, if I talk about sociology as a subject, this I believe enhances your understanding of the social world around you, and at the same time this helps you understand yourself better as well. So moving on, we're talking about points in support of the idea of nurture. We initially spoke about feral children. We went on to to discuss different individuals from different societies. All of this in support of the idea of socialization. Then we went on and we spoke about the I and me theory. Then we spoke about the presentation of self. And finally, we talk about this looking glass self theory that was put forward by C.H. Cooley, this gentleman. Now, 50 years before Goffman, that is in 1909, Cooley suggested that in majority of social encounters, other people are used as a looking glass self. Now, what does it mean when when we use the term, when we use the phrase looking glass self? They're like mirrors. In other words, according to Cooley, we use other individuals, or we treat other individuals more like mirrors. They're like mirrors reflecting ourselves as others see us. When we look into the mirror of how others behave towards us, we see reflected an image of the person they think we are. Like if you remember what I'd mentioned earlier, I'd I think I use the word, I use the color blue. Yeah. So remember when I said if you wear blue, someone tells you look amazing in blue, you'd want to wear blue again. At the same time, if you wear, let's just say orange, someone tells you look pathetic in orange, the likelihood of you giving it a second thought before you wearing that particular dress again would always be there. So the presentation of self always involves, number one, the importance of interpretation, right? The way we're interpreting ourselves, or the way we're interpreting the situation, or the way we're interpreting our identities. So the importance of interpretation. Identities are broad social categories whose meaning differs both historically and across different cultures. The significance, again, identities are broad social categories whose meaning differs both historically and across different cultures. The most basic example, a male identity and a female identity, this varies with time across societies. Next, the significance of negotiation. It's pretty important that we understand that identities are not static. Identities are dynamic. Identities change. Identities are always open to discussion and negotiation. What it means to be a male, what it means to be a female, what it means to be young, what it means to be old. I'm sure you'd agree the perception that people had of being a male 50 years back compared to the perception people hold today of being a male has changed. They say 40 is the new young. At least I like to believe that. So the significance of negotiation, identities are always open to discussion. What it means to be male, female, young, old, and so on is constantly changing as people push the negotiated boundaries of their identities. So these examples that we just spoke about, all of them are in support of the idea of nurture playing its role in terms of understanding or in terms of explaining social behavior. Before this, we spoke in the previous lesson, we spoke about the nature side of the debate. Today, we spoke about the nurture side of the debate. And next in line, we'd speak about agencies of socialization, but I'd like to keep that for the next lesson. I hope this has been helpful. Thank you.